Barbies. Hello.
Hi.
Hi everyone, I'm going to start talking about 4.NF.2, which is how do I reduce, compare, and order fractions. Over here, I need to remember that there are 3 rules to use when doing this, and I should not stop until the rules don't work anymore. Sometimes you just got to keep on going. You can't leave a fraction that still can be worked on. So we're going to look at some examples. The first rule is if the numerator and the denominator are both even, you can divide both of them by 2. So first, for example, 4, 6, both of them are even, so I know I can just cut them in half, which is what we like to say sometimes, which is dividing by 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So 4 6 simplified is 2/3, and this is also equivalent fractions. Over to 8 twelfths, I notice, hey, both of those are even, so I can certainly divide them by 2. And when I do that, 8 divided by 2 will be 4, and 12 divided by 2 will be 6. However, when I'm simplifying fractions, I can't stop there because I notice that still the 4 and the 6 are still both even, so I can still divide them by 2 again. So I'm going to do it one more time. And now 4 divided by 2 gets me down to 2, and 6 divided by 2 gets me down to 3. Now I can stop because they are not both even again. So just don't stop until you've used all your strategy. The second rule for doing this is to check and see if the numerator, which is the top number, can fit into the denominator, which is the bottom number. And then if it can, you divide both of them by that. So for example, I know that 3 can fit into 12, so I'm going to divide by the 3. So 3 divided by 3 and 12 divided by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. Here's another example. I know that 3 can fit into 18 6 times, so I know I can divide both the top number by 3 and the bottom number by 3, and I can get 1/6. For this last one, I know that 4 also fits into 28, so I'm going to divide by 4, and that's going to get me to 1/7. So now all of those have been simplified, and they are also equivalent to the first number we started with. The third rule is that if both the numerator and the denominator you can't use these other 2 rules for them. The last rule that you check to make sure is there another number that will fit into both of them? So for example, if I have the fraction 12/18 and I need to simplify that, I think to myself, well, 6 fits into both of those numbers. So I can divide 6 into both those numbers. So 12 divided by 6 will get me down to 2, and 18 divided by 6 will get me to 3. Over here for this one, I have 9/12, so I need to simplify it. I can't use the other 2 rules, but I can divide both of them by 3. So 9 divided by 3 gets me down to 3, and 12 divided by 3 gets me down to 4. Those are the 3 rules. 1, if they're even, cut them in half. 2, check to see if the numerator can fit in the denominator, and if it can, divide them both by that number. If neither of those rules work, think about, is there another number that fits into both of them, and then divide by that number. Okay? Now you're going to give it a try. So on a sheet of paper, go ahead and write these down, pause the video, and work to simplify them to see if we get matching answers. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and go over these. So the first one, 4/12, I think to myself, well, I know 4 times 3 is 12, so that means that I can divide both the top and the bottom by the numerator. So I'm going to divide both by 4. So that gets me to 1/3. For this next one, 9/15, I know that 3 fits into both of them, so I'm going to use 3 to simplify. I'm going to divide by 3. 3 fits into 9 3 times, and 3 fits into 15 5 times. Okay, the next one, 8/12. Well, you could do this a couple different ways. They're both even, so you could divide them by 2. You just need to keep going until you can't go any further. Or you could pick a larger number, like maybe 4. 4 fits into both 8 and 12. So 8 divided by 4 gets me down to 2, and 12 divided by 4 gets me down to 3. Let me show you if I did that one by 2. So 8 divided by 2 would get me to 4, and 12 divided by 2 would get me to 6. I just have to realize that I can't stop there. I got to keep going. So I'm going to do it again. And that's okay. Either way, I'm going to get to the same answer. So it's okay if you want to just do it by 2. It just might take you a little longer. Over here to this one, 9/21, I start thinking to myself, well, they're not even. 9 doesn't fit into 21, but I know a number that fits into both, and that is 3. So 9 divided by 3 is 3, and 21 divided by 3 is 7. Which is a big hint to this one right over here. So for this one, for example, I know that 7, the numerator, will fit into the denominator. So that means I'm going to divide by that numerator. 7 fits into 7 one time. 7 fits into 21 3 times. Then I come over here to 12/54. Now both of these numbers are even, and you could cut them in half. Again, you would just have to keep doing that until you couldn't any longer. But if you can think about it for a second, or maybe even do a T-chart for both of those numbers, you would know that 6 could fit into both of them. So I'm going to divide by 6. 12 divided by 6 will get me down to 2, and 54 divided by 6 will get me down to 9. Okay, let's talk about what to do when you're given a large fraction like this with a large numerator and denominator. Sometimes it will just be too overwhelming, but if you see that both the numerator and the denominator are both even, you can always start by dividing by 2. That will at least take you down to smaller numbers that you then might recognize factors and multiples for. So, for example, I could just go ahead and cut 24 and 96 in half and get myself down to, I know that half of 24 is 12, but I might have to do a little division for 96, so I just would do it over to the side and figure out, bring down, that would go into there 8 times. So I would figure out that that is 48, and then I would say to myself, oh, well, 12 fits into 48, so now I know I can divide by 12. So sometimes just dividing by 2 is helpful to get the numbers to a place that are more recognizable. So now that would take me down to 1/4. Okay, I also wanted to remind you that if you are reducing a fraction that is a mixed number, that you need to make sure that you bring the whole with you. So for example, if you need to reduce 4/12, the 3 remains the same. So I know for 4/12 I can divide both of those by 4. So that would get me to 1/3, but I need to remember to bring that 3 with me. So 3 and 4/12 reduced would be 3 and 1/3, just as a reminder. Okay, now we're going to move ahead into the second part of this standard, which is comparing and ordering the fractions. So comparing fractions is basically just deciding which one is larger or smaller depending on what they're asking you to do. And the quickest strategy, which you all love, is the butterfly method. So all we do for the butterfly method is we take the two fractions they're asking us to compare, and we circle them both going diagonal like this, and then we write the multiplication over. So 5 times 5 will be 25, and 8 times 2 is 16. Now once I do that, I'm able to tell that 25 is the larger number, and I can do my alligator mouth in, and I know that 5/8 is the larger fraction. So that way 5/8 is bigger. So if I do the same, eventually you don't have to draw, and you just know 3 times 4 is 12, and 6 times 2 is 12. And if they say 12 on both sides, then you know that they are equal, equivalent fractions. Over for this one, 8 times 3 is 24, and 4 times 5 is 20. So I can see that 24 is the larger fraction, and that's how I would compare those two. Now I have a few for you to try. So go ahead on a scrap piece of paper and try these 3. You can pause the video right here and try them, and then see if our answers will match. Okay, let me go ahead. 10 times 2 is 20. 3 times 3 is 9. So I know the alligator wants that one. Over here, 4 times 5 is 20, and 8 times 3 is 24. So I know the alligator wants that one. And then over here, I can kind of tell without looking because I already know that 4/8 is half, but we're gonna just go ahead and do it. There you go. Hope you got those right. Now we're going to ordering fractions. The biggest trick for when you're putting fractions in order is to make sure that you have followed directions. So be sure to box in whatever they tell you to do. If they want you to order them from least to greatest or from greatest to least, you need to put that in a box so that you can definitely follow the directions. That's the biggest way kids get these wrong. Also, it says to see if any are equivalent to 1/2. A lot of times that helps. So if I have this on my sheet, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to box it in. It's hard to do when you have one hand on the camera. And then I notice here that 4/8 is equal to 1/2. So I'll just note that for myself. Sometimes that can be very helpful. If I'm putting these in order from the biggest to the smallest, I know that 4/8 is equal to 1/2. I know that 1/3 is less than 1/2 because 1/2 of 3 would be 1.5. So that's going to be if I was doing a number line on the side that's less than 1/2. And then I know 5/6 is greater than 1/2. So I really don't need to do anything else because I can tell 5/6 was going to be the greatest fraction here. Then I know that I have 4/8, that's equal to 1/2. And then I know 1/3 would be closer to 0. So it would be in this order to be in order from greatest to least. You could also, if you didn't know and you started worrying, oh dear, I'm not sure which one's smaller or less than, you can always put 2 together to butterfly. So for example, if I'm going to do these, remember the first thing I want to do is box in my directions so I don't get it wrong, least to greatest. For these, I see I have 2/4, 2/6, and 8/12. Of course, I noticed right off the bat that 2/4 is equivalent to 1/2, so I'm going to write a little note to myself. Then I see that I have 2/6, which I say to myself, that's less than 1/2 because it would have to be 3/6 to be 1/2. So I know that this is less. Sometimes I make a little L underneath. Over here I have 8/12. I know that 6/12 would be equal to 1/2, so that this one is greater. 8/12 is greater than 1/2. So again, just by talking about the benchmark fractions of 0, 1/2, and 1 whole, I'm able to put these in order. So from least to greatest, I'm going to have 2/6, 2/4, and then 8/12. Okay. One more here. I'm going to do the same thing, least to greatest. I have 3/4, 4/5, and 4/6. Now these numbers, there is nothing here that has an equivalent to 1/2 like this one did. So these numbers are all closer. So I start thinking about it first. I think, well, 3/6 would be equivalent to 1/2, and this is 4/6. So I know it's just over, this is going to be just over 1/2. 4/5, I say to myself, well, 1/2 of 5 is 2.5, so that's way over. 3/4, that's almost a whole. So then I start thinking to myself, gosh, these ones are going to be really close, so I don't know. What you will do is then you just put those off to the side on your paper and you just butterfly them. And that's how you tell which one's close, which one's larger. So that, once I do that over to the side, now I know that 4/5 is going to be bigger than 3/4. So then I look back at my order and I say, well, I'm not really sure. Let me check and just make sure which one of these is bigger. So now I'm going to do 4/5 and I'm going to do 4/6 just to make sure. And I'm going to say, okay, so now I know that 4/5 is bigger than the other two fractions. So if I'm doing this in order from least to greatest, I know 4/5 is the biggest one. I'm going to put it here. The other two that I have to work with then are 3/4 and 4/6. So you could also just go ahead and butterfly 3/4 and 4/6. And then you know that 3/4 is the bigger one, so it's going to go in front. And then the smallest one is going to be 4/6. So the order of your fractions is there for you. So if you can't do it this way, by thinking about your benchmark fractions, then you're just going to have to butterfly to figure out. Okay, go ahead and give it a try. Grab a piece of paper and copy these down and order them from greatest to least. You're going to have to pause the video to have a couple seconds to do it and then start it back up when you're ready to see if we get matching answers. Okay, the first thing I do when I see these is I think about how similar these fractions probably are in size. So I need to start butterflying them. There's nothing near that's equal to a half that I can really use to help me. So I'm gonna go ahead and start butterflying these first two. So 5/7 versus 3/4. So I'm gonna butterfly across. I'm gonna get 21. This way, 4 times 5, I'm gonna get 20. So I see that 3/4 is larger. So I really think 3/4 is going to be the larger fraction. I'm just going to test out to see about 5/7 and 4 6. 7 times 4 is 28. 6 times 5 is 30. So I see yes. So of those fractions, I see that 3/4 is the larger fraction. And then we had 5/7 was next in order from greatest to least, and then followed by 4 6. Good deal. You can keep practicing these. If you have your Eureka book home with you, the Succeed book, you can look in lessons 7 through, no, I'm sorry, it would be lessons 12 through 15 in fraction comparison. That would be the unit that you would want to look in to practice these further for lessons 12 through 15. All right, good luck. Bye.